Welcome back to the Flying with the Flock podcast, the best place to get all of your Eagles and other NFL related news. I'm your host, Matt, and ladies and gentlemen, we have made it through the NFL legal tampering period and free agency as well, at least the first week. There's still a lot more people out there to be scooped up and put onto starting NFL rosters, but we'll have to wait for those kind of people to show up later down the line in our news feed. Before we jump into it, if y'all could leave a like and subscribe below, I would much appreciate that. You know that your support never goes unnoticed on this channel. And as we grow our small family of viewers, consistent viewers, might I say, I want to thank you guys so much for the consistent, 8, 9, 10, 11 views per episode over the past few weeks. It's meant a lot. And I'm still working on some stuff after we get through this initial free agency period. There's a couple things that you all might like down the pipe here coming real soon. And so let's jump into this episode. So normally I don't have, normally I do have a script when it comes to these kind of episodes. What I kind of want to base off of what topics I want to cover, because in the NFL it's hard to cover everything. And also, every minute detail is not going to be talked about on this channel. Unfortunately, I'm an Eagles channel first and the NFL channel second. And so we will be talking about the Eagles last, so stay tuned for them. But we are going to cover all of some of these major moves. I'm just going to go through every team listed here on the NFL website and all their moves underneath of it. If there's an important move or an interesting signing that I like for a team, I will discuss it briefly, and we'll discuss some other move that they might have done, and then we'll move on. I will not be covering every team. I will be covering most, but that's because not every team really has made a move. There's literally been one team who has not made a move all offseason, that being the Broncos. So, yeah, let's jump right into it. So we got the Buffalo Bills up first. The Bills, obviously they traded for DJ Moore. We talked about that last week. I'm not going to talk about it again. They had three interesting signings to me. One being Dawson Knox signing a new 3-year contract. I don't know the details. Let's see. Dawson Knox. Jesus, if I could type, that would be much better. New deal. It's a 3-year extension, $20 million value. This roughly helped the Bills free up $8.5 million in cap space, which you see a lot of the best teams doing, is re-signing some of their guys to open up options to go out and grab some other pieces. So honestly, when Dawson Knox is on the field, the Bills play 10 times better, it feels like. Although they have a guy in Dalton Kincaid who's a fine tight end. Dalton Knox, to me, is the Bills tight end of the future and moving forward. And I just think he helps elevates Josh Allen's play to the next level. They also signed two defensive veteran guys. We'll talk about Bradley Chubb first. He signed a 3-year, $43.5 million deal. Now, this is interesting because Chubb, at this point in his career, is 29 years old. That tends to be when pass rushers take a drop off, and his production significantly went down in his time in Miami from his time in Denver under Vic Fangio. And so it's just interesting to me to see Chubb sign this long of a contract with a team. I would have thought he would have been a 1, maybe 2-year deal at most, based off his age and based off his production. But he got $29 million guarantee, and he can earn up to $43.5 million. And another decent signing is C.J. Gardner-Johnson. C.J. Gardner-Johnson is 28 years old heading into this upcoming NFL season. He's on a 1-year deal up to $6 million. To me, after bouncing around from the Eagles and then getting cut during the offseason, then signing with the Texans, them being cut halfway through the season, and then finally being picked up by the Bears and seeing moderate success with them. It's a good signing. He's going to a good team, and teams that pick up C.J. Gardner-Johnson more often than not are highly successful on the defensive front, and so I will definitely be interesting to see how he kind of impacts his defense as a whole. Obviously, like we talked about maybe 2 weeks ago at this point, this defense needs to get younger and fast. And bringing in a guy like Bradley Chubb and C.J. Gardner-Johnson really isn't going to push that needle for me. We got to see what they do through the draft, in my opinion. But these are good first moves to bring in some good veteran talent. Miami Dolphins, they did a lot of moves, but the only one I'm going to talk about is signing quarterback Malik Willis to a 3-year, $67.5 million deal with $45 million of that being fully guaranteed. Now, Willis has only started 6 games in his NFL career, being a backup for the past 2 seasons in Green Bay and then trying to vie for the starting job in Tennessee back in 2023, I believe it was. So, or was it 2022? Might have been 2023. No, it was 23. But Willis, he's such a polarizing quarterback for me at this moment because he earns so much money. And it really just proves that as long as you can show that you're a half-decent quarterback, and not that you can even elevate a franchise, but if you're half-decent and can operate, you can earn anywhere close to, $45 million guaranteed. And so Malik Willis could be a cautionary tale, but he could also be one of the greatest triumphs at quarterback we've seen over the past decade. And so Willis is ultimately going to have to prove it now. He had time to sit behind guys like Jordan Love, learn under guys like Sean Mannion. And so it's time for Willis to kind of prove that he's an NFL starting quarterback caliber in this league. But this might have been an overpay for the Dolphins, but it was either have him go to Miami or have him go to Arizona. And I think the Dolphins kind of needed him more than the Cardinals needed him. So, good for Malik Willis to get his money, and Dolphins might have been a little bit of an overpay, but what are you guys going to do? The Patriots, they've been quote-unquote touted on trying to trade for A.J. Brown, and they end up having to sign Romeo Doubs because that plan fell through. Romeo Doubs signed a 4-year, $70 million contract. Doubs, after the past few seasons, he's been quite efficient in his time in Green Bay. I would definitely be interested to see how he tries to up Drake May's game. But the problem for me right now for the Patriots, obviously it's great for Romeo Doubs, go get your money, go get generational wealth. But for the Patriots, we're paying this kind of guy this much money who's not going to come in and elevate the game. He's not going to command that defenses focus in on him. Rather, we need Drake May to kind of elevate these guys' play. And so now it becomes slightly concerning that you guys do not have your number one overall wide receiver. You just paid a guy massive money in guarantees, which eats up a lot of space you could do to trade for a guy like maybe A.J. Brown. You could have signed a guy like Mike Evans. There are quite a few different guys out there that you could have competed for, at least on the free agent market and possibly the trade market, that could have elevated Drake May's play. And so Romeo Doubs, I feel like, is a sign of kind of rolling over at this point. The Patriots are kind of accepting the fact that they're not going to find a top-tier guy through free agency or through trade, and they're not in a prime position either through draft. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Patriots kind of pull this off. But as of right now, Romeo Doubs is their top signing. The rest of these guys, besides like maybe Kevin Byard, the rest of these guys are just backups and depth pieces. Next up, we have the New York Jets, and by looking at it, they have a laundry list of different moves. I'm going to touch on some of these briefly, so let's break it down fast. They traded for quarterback Geno Smith from the Las Vegas Raiders. They got a Geno Smith and a 7th-round pick in the upcoming draft for a 2026 pick in the upcoming draft. And so Geno is back where he started his career, and it's funny, I went out to Applebee's the other night, and I watched a game where Geno Smith led the New York Jets to a win over Tom Brady's Patriots, and this is like early 2010s Patriots, or mid-2010s Patriots, because Julian Edelman was playing. So this is very interesting. I would like to see Geno Smith come back and prove everybody wrong once again. But to me, he's not a guy that's going to elevate a franchise. You need to bring in pieces around him that will play their hearts out. So, good move, I guess, for the Jets. You bring in a guy at quarterback, and it's an obvious sign that you guys aren't drafting a quarterback, and you guys are regretting the Justin Fields contract. Next up, we have a guy like Demario Davis, a very veteran linebacker who used to be down in New Orleans, now coming back up to New York. He signed a 2-year, $22 million that includes $15 million in fully guarantees. Davis is on the tail end of his career, you could say, and I think he'll be a great veteran voice for this locker room and for this younger defense. But we're going to have to wait and see what instant impact he can have as a player long before he does as a leader. Speaking of another veteran piece, we have safety Minkah Fitzpatrick was acquired in a trade from the Miami Dolphins in exchange for a 2026 7th-round pick. Now, Fitzpatrick is going to be, I think he's going to turn 30 heading into this upcoming season. And so the Jets didn't really trade anything away for another top senior defensive player, another voice that can come in and demand authority in this defense. He had an okay season with the Dolphins this past season. Obviously, the highlight of his career was his time in Pittsburgh, but I still feel like Minkah has left a lot to be desired ever since leaving Pittsburgh, and so we're going to have to wait and see how that pans out in New York as a New York Jet. Moving over to the AFC North, let's see. Baltimore, okay, so, oh boy. With Baltimore, we kind of have to talk about the Max Crosby situation. So, Max Crosby, as I reported and I talked about last week, was going to be traded to the Ravens for 2 first-round picks, one in 2026, one in 2027, which the Raiders would receive. Max Crosby was going to become a Raven, and the AFC North would be the best division when it came to edge rushers. Well, that's not quite true anymore, because it was reported on Tuesday night that the Baltimore Ravens essentially got cold feet and backed out of the trade. They listed it as he did not pass his physical, at least to their standards, I guess. And the rest of the NFL listed it as bullshit. The Ravens obviously got cold feet, realized that they lost a lot more pieces than they thought they would in free agency. And so they immediately backed out of the trade to recoup their first-round picks. And it's an ultimately slimy and disgusting move by this franchise. One that, let's just say, has covered up murders and possible alleged murders of franchise guys, and allowing their running backs to beat women on camera and beat the shit out of them too. And so this organization continues to be class act, ladies and gentlemen. I just hope that no general manager is going to be talking to the Ravens to trade and or work out any deals moving forward. And I hope the NFL kind of screws them over, because what they did was genuinely shitty. They traded for a guy, got his hopes up, and he was excited to be there, had fans shaving their head, and then they backed out of it. So, good job, Baltimore. Everybody loves you. And then they went out and they signed Trey Hendrickson to a 4-year, $112 million deal, up to $60 million guaranteed, which is probably around the deal that he was looking for originally. Though my only problem with that is that he's already 31 years old. Why would you sign him to a 4-year contract with that much money guaranteed? If he's injured, there's a 25, maybe 30% chance that that could be it for his career. And so the Ravens just continue to make one boneheaded mistake after another. I know what you're saying. Max Crosby is only 29 years old, only 2 years younger than Trey Hendrickson, but still, that does not make sense. Trey Hendrickson, as good as he is, he's top 5 edge rusher in the league, but you could have had the second best in the league. But, oh well. Ravens continue to show that they are a class act organization all around, and Max Crosby gets sent back to the Raiders, which we will talk about the effects of that once we get to the Raiders. The Bengals did nothing, so there's nothing for me to talk about the Bengals. The Cleveland Browns traded for a lot of lesser-known offensive linemen to start, but we're not going to talk about them. The Steelers, it was pretty big for the Steelers. Looking at it, they traded for Michael Pittman with the Colts. They sent a 6th-round pick for Michael Pittman and a 7th-round pick in this upcoming draft. And then Pittman immediately signed a new 3-year, $59 million deal with the Steelers. And so it seems like Michael Pittman and DK Metcalf are going to be an interesting duo here in this upcoming season. And I genuinely think if you get a guy like Aaron Rodgers, or let's say Aaron Rodgers let's say he retires, because we don't know yet. I think that you could still get a guy in here like a Kirk Cousins, and he would still succeed in this scheme with these top-tier wide receivers. I think Michael Pittman is very underrated. I don't think he's a number 1 wide receiver, but if you put him at number 2 and have people doubling DK, it's going to be sky's the limit for him. And if you're DK, now you don't have only yourself and then Calvin Austin III being the next best wide receiver, or an old Adam Thielen. So you get a running mate that possibly takes some heat off of you as well at times. And so we're going to see how both benefit from it. But to me, the Michael Pittman trade was one of the better moves made on the first day of free agency. They re-signed Cameron Hayward to a 2-year, $32.25 million contract with $65.25 million of that guaranteed. Let's see. They re-signed Cole Holcomb, who they were rumored to let go and let test in the market, but they re-signed him to a 2-year, $5 million deal. They signed Jamal Dean to a 3-year, $36 million deal, almost $37 million deal. I'm not sure how much of that is guaranteed, but that's a pretty sneaky signing for the Steelers, who add to their secondary, who already has Joey Porter Jr., Jalen Ramsey, now Jamal Dean, who had an amazing career down in Tampa. Yes, he's a little bit on the older side, as we mentioned last week, being 29, and so by the time his contract is up, he'll be in his early 30s, but it's still a solid piece to bring in. And then they also brought in safety Jaquan Brisker to a 1-year, $5.5 million deal. And so they are starting to really load up on the defensive side of the ball to make guys like TJ Watt and Cam Hayward's jobs way easier than before. And so to me, this is kind of the right route. Bring in some veteran presence and bring in some wide receiver presence as well. Because Michael Pittman's only 28. Damn, he's 20. He's been I remember when he was drafted. That was 6 years ago. He's 28 now? Jesus. I'm old. But, anyway. Jesus. Anyway, getting back on track here. I feel like Pittsburgh made a lot of sneaky good moves in this free agency to reload. We'll have to wait and see how Mike McCarthy kind of uses this offensive defense moving forward. And we're going to have to wait and see what Aaron Rodgers' decision is, whether it's to come back and play or whether it's to retire and just set off into the sunset. Next up, we're heading down to the AFC South, where we're covering the Houston Texans. The Texans, they're a big deal to me. There are two guys that they kind of brought in with some veteran presence to really up their defense and offense. The first one being running back David Montgomery. They traded with the Detroit Lions, sending a offensive lineman, a 2026 fourth round pick, and a 7th round selection in 2027. David Montgomery, obviously, been one of the most underrated running backs, I would say, since he's had to be stuck behind Jahmyr Gibbs, who to me is the best running back right now in the NFL based off of last season. And so this really gives him room to breathe. And I know he wanted to stay in Detroit, but I do feel like his style of play can fit Houston's scheme really well. And he consistently stays healthy, which is very important for the Texans and the running back room. And so I would not be totally surprised if this is one of the better moves in the AFC South as a whole this past offseason. The other guy I wanted to talk about was safety Reed Blankenship, signed with the Texans here in Philly. We are kind of sad to see him go, but he got the money that he deserves. He signed a 3-year, $24.75 million deal with $16.5 million of that guaranteed. I'm excited for Reed to see what he can do moving forward. I do think that it is a great fit for this defense, and I think he will find a lot of success in his career here in Houston. And who knows, maybe later down the line, when he becomes older and cheaper, maybe we bring him back and reunite the exciting lights. But we'll have to wait and see. But good luck, Reed Blankenship, and thank you for everything you've done. Next up, with the Colts, there are two big things I want to talk about. First off, they signed the biggest contract for a wide receiver in NFL history, that being Alec Pierce getting re-signed to the Colts for a 4-year, $114 million contract. That includes $84 million in guarantees. And so this is a massive deal for Alec Pierce. I don't think he deserves it. He is not. He might be in my top 20. Barely. He might be like 20 or... he's closer to like 25 in the top like wide receivers in the league. But this kind of money is insane, and unfortunately I do feel like that this contract has not been quite warranted by Pierce. The Colts were just worried about losing him. And so it's going to be interesting to see how Pierce tries to elevate his game now that he's number one wide receiver, because they traded Michael Pittman. And so we're going to have to wait and see. But Alec Pierce, I guess good job getting your money, although I don't think it's fully deserved. I can't hate on a guy for getting the bag and getting out. Next up is Daniel Jones, also re-signed with the Colts to a 2-year, $88 million deal that can be up to worth $100 million in incentives, and $60 million of that is guaranteed. Okay, what does this mean? Well, first off, it means that Daniel Jones' agent is one of the best agents in the NFL, and I think all players should try to get him. Daniel Jones, after this contract is up, if he plays all the way through and makes the most amount of money, will have made $299 million in his career as a quarterback. Let that sink in. Daniel Jones will have been up there in top 10 quarterback money all time. He might be like 6 in top quarterback money of all time. To me, that's insane. that's as insane as Kirk Cousins being up there as well. And so to me, it really isn't warranted. But Daniel Jones might. And again, you got to think of it this way: the Colts also don't know where his Achilles is at, and we've seen Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins recently come off of Achilles injuries, and it really hasn't gone that well for them. But Daniel Jones, I do wish you the best of luck. It's not a great deal for the Colts, and I think they well overpaid for both their quarterback and wide receiver. But who knows? I guess we'll have to find out. The Jaguars did nothing. The Titans did a lot. And when I mean a lot, it is a longer list than the Jets did. And so, who do I want to talk about? They signed wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson to a 4-year, $178 million deal. That's roughly around $38 million guaranteed. That's an interesting amount of money for a guy that really hasn't proved himself in New York, even as a number 2 or number 3 wide receiver. But the Titans wanted to bring in a guy that understands Brian Daboll's system. They brought in some offensive line. They brought in some good defensive linemen. Some mostly have some veteran experience. And so overall, the Titans, they brought in a lot of guys that are going to help add some depth at important positions like O-line and D-line. But to me, it's kind of a nothing burger. We're going to see how they kind of start to shape this roster around. But if the past couple of years are any evidence, Cam Ward is going to take a step forward, and we're going to have to wait and see how that looks. Also, the Titans changed their logo. It looks horrible. It looks like a Tesla logo. But their uniforms are, oh boy, they're some of the best in the league. Obviously, if y'all remember the Houston Oilers, this is the same franchise, just under a different name and a different location. They reverted back to the original colors of white, light blue, and red. It looks amazing, but their logo looks horrible. Moving over to the AFC West, the Denver Broncos literally, and I mean literally, did nothing. They re-signed guys. They brought back guys like J.K. Dobbins and Jaleel McLaughlin, Adam Troutman, Alex Singleton, but they didn't really do anything worth note. The Kansas City Chiefs, they signed Kenneth Walker to a 3-year deal up to worth $45 million with $28.7 million guaranteed. To me, this is a little bit expensive for a guy like Kenneth Walker, who really hasn't proven anything. Outside, obviously, yes, Super Bowl MVP, just won the Super Bowl. I understand. He looked great in that game. But last season, what the hell did he do to get the Seahawks into that position? It was their defense, special teams, and sometimes Sam Darnold's play that ultimately got them to the Super Bowl. It was not the rushing game. And so it really makes me question whether we're going to see a slight inflation in wide receiver pay over the next coming seasons. But Kenneth Walker and Patrick Mahomes in the same backfield is going to be dangerous. I 100% think that the Chiefs are going to take a step forward, at least on the offensive side of the ball. When it comes to everything else, obviously, let's talk about they re-signed Travis Kelce to a 1-year, $12 million deal. That's fine. But they lost a lot of different pieces. If you look at it, they lost a lot of, besides depth, they lost a lot of key silent workhorses across the D-line, at different skill positions. And so, to me, I think that ultimately the Chiefs are going to be better next season, especially on offense, especially with a good run game, with a guy like Kenneth Walker being in the backfield. But I need them to impress me. I need them to go out, ace the draft, and then bring in some more depth pieces that could ultimately shape up to be good signings down the road here in free agency. Las Vegas Raiders, obviously they retained Max Crosby, so he's back. But they signed guys like Connor Hayward to a 2-year deal up to $5.5 million. They signed guys like wide receiver Jalen Naylor to a 3-year, $35.3 million deal with up to $23 million in total guarantees. Tyler Linderbaum, who was one of the top free agents of his entire class, signed a 3-year, $81 million deal. Edge Kwity Paye signed a deal up to $16 million. Nakobe Dean, we're going to miss you, pal, but go earn the money that you deserve. Signed a 3-year, $36 million deal with up to $20 million guaranteed. And Quay Walker as well signed a 3-year, $40.5 million deal with up to $28 million guaranteed. And they also traded for some corners and signed and re-signed some of their guys. But the Raiders really went out there, spent a lot of money to build up in the wake of trading Max Crosby, and then once they got him back, it's like, oh crap, we barely have any money left now. And so with all that being said, the Raiders went out there, spent big time. Obviously, they're going to take Fernando Mendoza with the number 1 overall pick. It's just building a team around him at that. So the franchise, Jesus, I can't even talk today. So the franchise does not have to rely on a rookie quarterback solely. There you go. Also, they have one of the best linebacker duos in the league now with Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker. Let me just put that out there. But Raiders had a fun free agency. Hopefully there's still more to come for some depth, but overall still pretty decent. Chargers brought in a lot of offensive linemen. Guys like Trevor Penning, Cole Strange, Tyler Biadasz, Trey Pipkins, and they brought in some D-line depth as well. Another important move for them was re-signing Khalil Mack. He signed to a 1-year, $18 million contract. I think that this is a smart move. Although he is, how old is Khalil Mack at this point? Although he's not 25. Although he's 35, he has still been quite productive in his old age, and I think that he can do it again. We just got to see how they continue to bring in O-line depth and D-line depth through the draft. I'm going to save the NFC East for last. We're going to go all the way to the NFC West, in which we'll start with the Cardinals, who signed a guy like Tyler Algier. That's a good move. James Conner, their starting running back, is getting a little bit on the older side for a running back's career. So bringing in a guy like Tyler Algier, who's had some starting experience in Atlanta, who's only 25 years old, and signing him to a 2-year, $12.2 million contract is a smart move for the Cardinals. Also, signing a guy like Kendrick Bourne to a 2-year, $10 million deal is smart as well. He's shown flashes at San Francisco this past season. Although he's already 30, it still was fun to watch him ball out. We'll have to wait and see whether he's able to take the next step forward with the Cardinals, but it's an interesting sentiment to put out there. They also got some O-line depth, like guys like Matt Pryor, who was formerly with the Eagles. He signed to a 1-year deal. Isaac Sanamalu signed to a 3-year, $31.5 million contract. And they brought in some D-line depth as well. But I do feel like the Cardinals are in a weird situation because they now have to deal with the Kyler Murray fallout. They're not in a good position to draft a quarterback that's really worth it. And so the Cardinals are probably going to have to wheel out Jacoby Brissett there day one. And hope that works. And the best that they could be to me is a surprising wild card team. But to me, they still need to build up that offensive line a little bit more. And they need to bring in a true running mate alongside Marvin Harrison Jr. Next up is the Rams. The Rams, we talked about, they re-signed guys like Cam Curl. They traded for guys like Trent McDuffie. The only other major thing that they did was sign another former Chiefs corner, Jalen Watson, to a 3-year, $51 million deal with up to $34 million guaranteed. It's almost like they heard what I said, that their corners was the weakest part of their entire defense and arguably their entire team. And they went out and they brought in guys with Super Bowl winning experience. And they're probably both going to be their starting corners. And that's going to be interesting to see. I would just like to see how things kind of start to play out with their defense as a cohesive unit, not just, oh, let's plug in these guys and see how they work. Also, because his name is funny, they signed a guy called David Quisenberry. And that's a really funny name. Say it with me, guys. Quisenberry. Next up, we have the 49ers, and not too many big deals. They they brought back a former linebacker, Dre Greenlaw, to a 1-year, $7.5 million deal. And what threw me off there was that there's a typo on the official NFL website. It says signed a 1-year, $7.5 million deal instead of signed. That's pretty funny to me when I always catch that. But the major thing to me for the 49ers was signing wide receiver Mike Evans to a 3-year deal. It's roughly around, I think, like $30 million and like up to like $15 million guaranteed. Mike Evans coming in, obviously, like I said, the 49ers need weapons. I wasn't exactly saying they needed a weapon that's 32 years old, but we'll have to wait and see whether Evans plays out the full 3 years or whether he cuts it early, maybe at 2. But, again, he's been injured this past couple of seasons. The 49ers struggle with injury, and so I can't tell whether this is a match made in heaven or a match made in hell. But at least it gives Brock Purdy another human being to throw to outside of Ricky Pearsall, at least for the start of this upcoming NFL season. And we have our Super Bowl champs who really have lost a lot of pieces, but they signed a guy like Rashid Shaheed to a 3-year, $51 million deal. He was very much a dynamic playmaker for the Seahawks on special teams and at the wideout position as a whole. The Seattle's offense looked 10 times more deep and drastically better when Rashid Shaheed came to Seattle. We'll have to wait and see whether that is a continued theme or whether that was just luck from this past season, but I'm excited to see how Seattle does losing all these different kind of pieces. And another smart move to re-sign was cornerback Josh Jobe, who had a sneaky season at age 27 heading into this next season. He was one of the more underrated corners when it came to stats, and I would definitely like to see him improve now, especially with guys like Tariq Woolen being gone. I do feel like it's time for guys like Josh Jobe to step up and ultimately play the part as a starting corner. Next up, we got the NFC South, and now I will not touch on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because they really did nothing besides like sign Kenny Gainwell to a 2-year, $14 million deal, and Cade Otton to a $30 million deal with up to $20 million in fully guarantees extension. The Saints, they signed a guy like Travis Etienne. I was not expecting him to overall sign with a place like the Saints, but that's interesting to me. They signed a 4-year, $52 million deal, and Etienne has been really good. It's the first time that he's not going to be a teammate of Trevor Lawrence since 2016. So it's going to be interesting to see how he starts to open up his game a little bit more. And there's a possibility that he plays alongside Alvin Kamara, which could help him out a ton as well. But being 27 years old, this probably being one of his last major contracts, I'd be interested to see how dynamic of a player he is in Kellen Moore's system. Carolina Panthers, they took a flyer on a guy like John Mechie and David Moore. They brought in a guy like Rashad Walker, who was decent. He's a younger offensive tackle. He was with the Packers this past season. He was okay. They signed him to a one-year deal up to $10 million. Their major deal, though, was signing Jalen Phillips. He stole them from the Eagles. He signed a 4-year, $120 million deal, which the Eagles clearly weren't matching. And this is a massive overpay to me. Phillips was good, but he's consistently been injured. Obviously, this past season has been an outlier compared to that. But to me, Phillips could have earned probably a 4-year, $80 million deal, and that'd be fine. The Panthers took a swing, and now they have to bet on Jalen Phillips being the guy, being able to walk the walk, talk the talk outside of their system, like Vic Fangio's. I hope that he succeeds, but if you want me to be honest, I would not be surprised if he doesn't. And the Panthers also brought in a guy like Devin Lloyd, who was really good with the Jaguars this past season. Only at 27 years old, I do feel like he can help fill out some of that defense, especially at the linebacker spot, obviously. The question is how is Carolina going to use him, and whether they're going to use him correctly. But that's to be determined with the Carolina Panthers. The Falcons, they brought in a lot of depth on defensive line. They signed wide receiver Jahan Dotson. But the big move that I want to talk about is them signing quarterback Tua Tagovailoa to a one-year deal up to $1.2 or $1.3 million. Tua obviously is getting paid by the Dolphins to not play for them. He's getting paid like $99 million, I think, this upcoming season, not to play for the Dolphins. And so a guy like Tua should be thanking his lucky stars that a team like the Falcons are willing to take a flyer on another lefty quarterback. And he should be thinking that he's lucky because he might have a chance to start because of their quote-unquote franchise guy. We'll see whether that's true or not. But their franchise guy, Michael Penix, is injured currently. And so I would definitely like to see how Tua can come in and operate in a Kevin Stefanski system with weapons like Drake London and Kyle Pitts. And obviously with Bijan Robinson back there, that might take a little bit of pressure off his arm. But we're going to have to wait and see whether Tua can actually step up and be a starting quarterback for the Falcons this upcoming season, or whether he is just going to be another career backup like a Marcus Mariota moving forward. In the NFC North, we have the Chicago Bears, who have really done nothing crazy. They brought in a lot of guys to fill in depth. They have a lot of their stars, and outside of moving DJ Moore, I don't think they've done anything too crazy this offseason so far. So we're going to skip over the Bears. The Lions, they brought in a guy like Isaiah Pacheco, obviously after they traded David Montgomery. Bringing in a guy like Isaiah Pacheco on a one-year deal worth $1.8 million is probably a smart move, especially once Jahmyr Gibbs, you pound his legs into the ground. Allow a guy like Isaiah Pacheco, who has the same angry running style that David Montgomery had, to take over. But similar to the Bears, not too many crazy moves. Maybe those two teams are kind of more focusing on going through the draft to rebuild their teams, but we're going to have to wait and see. Packers did nothing besides sign defensive tackle Javon Hargrave to a 2-year, $23 million deal. And Benjamin St-Juste as well. I guess we can throw in their corner Benjamin St-Juste to a 2-year, $10 million deal. Packers, kind of underwhelming. Couple decent moves, but nothing too crazy. The Vikings, they re-signed Aaron Jones after they cut him. Let's see. The only other major move the Vikings did was signed Kyler Murray to a one-year deal. How much is Kyler Murray's new deal? Let's see. Worth $1.3 million. He's getting paid like $36.8 million by the Cardinals not to play for them this season. And so he was able to get the vet minimum for the Vikings. But to me, this is an amazing situation for Kyler to walk into. You have guys like Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. There's a lot of sins in this team. Aaron Jones, a lot of dynamic playmakers on offense. Obviously, they need to shore up their offensive line. I think that might be best through the draft in the first couple of rounds. But Kyler coming in with the quarterback whisperer, I wouldn't be surprised if this is another Sam Darnold situation for the Vikings. I just want to wait and see whether it actually pans out. And like I normally say, the quarterback decision is probably not going to be decided in March. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that there is an active QB battle for the starting quarterback position with the Vikings this upcoming offseason and especially during training camp. We'll have to wait and see whether J.J. McCarthy can beat out a guy like Kyler Murray or whether Kyler Murray actually focuses on his game and comes out and proves the world wrong. But as of right now, I think the world thinks that Kyler Murray is currently a bust. Hopefully, he proves them wrong. Lastly, we're going to touch on the NFC East, starting with the Dallas Cowgirls, who, outside of re-signing a guy like Javonte Williams earlier this offseason and tagging a guy like George Pickens, they re-signed some internal free agents, and yeah, the Cowboys last week before free agency were like roughly $16 million under the cap, which means they could not spend money because they owed money. And so they were able to get that down to roughly like $660. Well, not $660, $660,000 under the cap. That's why they're not making too many big moves outside of signing internal free agents and cheap guys to deals. Outside of that, do not expect too much from the Dallas Cowboys in the spending department this upcoming offseason. The Giants prove that now with Harbaugh heading to New York, some of his guys are very loyal, signing guys like Patrick Ricard to a 2-year, $7.6 million deal. Guys like tight end Isaiah Likely to a 3-year, $40 million deal, which can be up to $47.5 million in incentives. And where's the other guy? Come on. Where is... Damn. Hold on. There was 3 guys they signed. It was Picard. It was Likely. Was it McFadden? It might have been McFadden. Anyway, there's 3 guys that went up to New York from Baltimore to play with Hardball once again. They also re-signed a guy like Evan Neal. They signed a guy like Tremaine Edmonds at linebacker. He's been one of the quiet, better, and still relatively young linebackers in the league. They also signed a guy like Greg Newsome to a 1-year, $8 million deal at corner. Ultimately, a lot of good moves from the Giants here. I think that they're going to be a better team than they were this past season. Obviously, they only had, 3 wins this past season. And so maybe closer to 7 or 8 is more realistic for the Giants based off of the team that they are starting to assemble under Hardball. But we'll have to wait and see how some of these pieces kind of fit into Hardball's grand plan here in New York, and whether New York has the patience enough to give Hardball time to develop some of these pieces even further than he has, and develop guys like Cam Scatterboot and Jackson Dart. The Commanders re-signed a lot of guys and brought in a laundry list of depth pieces. I'm not going to cover the Commanders. They really didn't do anything too big. They just re-signed guys or signed guys to minimum contracts, like 1 year, 2 year deals for guys that could either be backup or a starter based off of how bad their roster is. And so we arrive to what you all have been waiting for, and that's been the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, last week we talked about Jordan Davis's new deal. Obviously, that opened up like roughly $8 million in cap space for the Eagles. The big move to me was signing corner Tariq Woolen to a 1 year max value of $15 million. Now, Tariq Woolen is currently 26. He was on the Seahawks this past season, obviously won the Super Bowl. He was one of the top corners, only behind Patrick Surtain and Quinyon Mitchell in yards allowed per snap. And he was also allowed less than 58% completion rating when targeted this past season. So he is really good. The only problem is when it comes to his tackling, in the past it has not been too great, but this past season his run tackling and his run commit has been 10 times better than it was during his rookie, sophomore, and third season in the NFL. Tariq Woolen is obviously going to come here and try to prove that he deserves a big contract, and all the more to him. This makes the cornerback room in Philly one of the best in the league. I mean, you have guys like Quinyon Mitchell, Tariq Woolen, Cooper DeJean, who are 3 all-pro corners, and they're going to come in this next season looking to clean up their play from last season, draw less penalties, and ultimately lock down multiple receivers at once. They also signed veteran corner Jonathan Jones. I believe he's like 30-something. It might be like... He's 32, won a couple Super Bowls with the Patriots. Jonathan Jones, great guy, great veteran piece to bring into this young corner room. I definitely think that he will be a depth piece on the team, and I think that ultimately, I think it's an okay signing. Not what I was expecting, but good. They signed outside linebacker Arnold Enabike. Jesus. I'm going to butcher this name right now. I will have it by next episode. Arnold Ebitike. Whatever. He's from Cameroon. He's from the same village as Joel Embiid. Okay, give me a break here, people. I'm trying. Arnold Ebitike signed a 1 year deal up to $7.3 million with $4.3 million guaranteed. Ebitike is really solid. He was one of the better pass rushers in pressure rate this past season. And he was underrated on that Atlanta Falcons defensive line. So we're going to have to wait and see whether he's able to rechannel that here in Philly. But he already has gone after guys that have hated on Philly. Also, he went to Penn State. So I do feel like Enabike, could beat. See, this is going to be last year's as a Raku that I couldn't pronounce for like 2 weeks. It's going to be an interesting situation. He's definitely going to be a depth piece, but I don't mind with some of the film I've been able to watch with him. He's been quite talented. And how old is he? At age 27, I'm not going to complain if he's on a 1 year deal at all. We also re-signed Grant Calcaterra. You know I've complained about his blocking, so we're not even going to talk about that right now. But we also signed tight end Johnny Munt. Johnny Munt is a veteran tight end. He's 31 years old, has 8 years of experience, and an amazing blocking tight end for the Jaguars this past season. If you go on and watch some of his film, he almost pancakes guys, like defensive linemen that have more speed than him. He puts them flat on their back and keeps charging forward. This is a guy that we need in the run offense. A guy that can actually handle a run defense, unlike Grant Calcaterra. And so Johnny Munt is a welcome addition, only on a 1-year contract, but I'm quite happy to see that Johnny Munt is a Philadelphia Eagle. And another situation I want to keep you guys up to, there's one Eagle that you guys did not hear the name of during this episode, and that is Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert has not... So the interesting situation is that the Eagles have been kicking the can down the road a little bit. Yesterday was Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th. But anyway, and so that was supposedly the date we would know whether Goedert would re-sign or he would move on from the Eagles. The Eagles then kicked the can down the road again till Monday. Now, why am I talking about Goedert? Obviously, I would like him back another season, but if he doesn't, then I can accept that. But him and the A.J. Brown situation, which I know nobody's excited to talk about, so I'm not going to talk about it in depth. Those two guys are kind of tied together. If they let Goedert walk, they cannot trade A.J. Brown. And if they trade A.J. Brown, they cannot let Goedert walk. And because of just the cap situation that they're in. And so... Or sorry, hold on. No. Jesus, I got this backward. If they re-sign Dallas Goedert, they cannot let A.J. Brown walk. But if they let Dallas Goedert walk, they cannot trade A.J. Brown. Did I just say that? I think I might have just said that. Anyway, so those two are kind of tied at the hip. If we see Dallas Goedert come back, there's a high chance that we're going to be just fine. I don't think A.J. Brown is going to be heading anywhere. I've been saying that for weeks now, and he's been liking posts by Jalen Hurts. So I think we have a lot of optimism. I got Tariq Woolen I mentioned last week as a possible signing for the Eagles. And to see it come to light is very exciting for me. I would love to see what he is able to do in this Vic Fangio defense. I would love to see Vic Fangio have him clean up some of the basics, like his tackling. But we'll have to wait and see all that until training camp in late June. Alright, so that's it for this episode of the podcast. Another long episode this week, but I hope you guys all enjoyed this episode as much as I did. It's been fun to watch all this NFL free agency stuff fall into place. And now that we get a better picture of what some of the teams are looking like, this episode's coming out on the 14th. The draft is at the end of April. I will be releasing a mock draft episode of this podcast in early April. And between now and then, we will be covering the big news, but I will also be doing a lot of tier lists of some of the teams, where I think they stack up after all their free agent signings, and then we'll do another one after their draft as well. So, with all that being said, I want to thank you guys for listening. Hopefully you listened all the way through. That would be amazing if you all did. But I think that's it for this episode. So I want to thank you guys once again, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day. And remember, go Birds.